Hello, YouTube family. This is KM Steps and with Undiluted TV, and I'm back for another episode. So we're going to get right into this. But first, I'd like to ask you to like this video. Please subscribe to the channel. Please comment in the comment box in the section below for comments. Support the channel if you'd like to, because the link to that will also be in the description box along with all the articles that we'll be reading from today. So let's get right into this, because I want to bring you some updates on this whole Leaving Neverland business, because a lot has been going on in the last few weeks since the last time we talked about it. So let's get on into what's going on with Neverland. Now, as a lot of you have heard, as a lot of you have seen, Oprah has been deleting pictures and tweets and posts and all kinds of stuff as it pertained to her involvement with the whole Leaving Neverland mockumentary. She has deleted just about everything. She has even removed the footage or the information that she had posted about the show that she did after the mockumentary aired. So she really seems to be publicly backing away from and backing up from and distancing herself from that whole Leaving Neverland debacle, because that's all it was. It was a debacle. It was a complete and total lie, and it was a debacle. And Miss Mammy Oprah seems to be trying to distance herself, trying to separate herself from the part that she played in the whole Leaving Neverland mess. But we're not giving her a pass. We're not giving her a pass. Not this time. She doesn't get a pass. Nobody gets a pass for this, because this was absolutely ridiculous and totally unnecessary. But let me go into this first article that I want to read to you, and it's coming from theboxhouston.com, and it says, did HBO pull the plug on Leaving Neverland? Oprah deletes interviews with accusers from YouTube page. So see, she's deleting pictures, she's deleting comments, she's deleting everything that has anything to do with Leaving Neverland, and we'll get into why she's doing all that in a minute. It says Oprah publicly backs away from Leaving Neverland as HBO is rumored to remove the documentary. Now, I've done some research and I've looked into it. I can't find any reputable sources that say that HBO has pulled the documentary, or that they're even thinking about pulling the documentary. And I'll keep, doing research on that to see if I can find something. But right now, even the outsources are not reporting that HBO has actually made a move to pull it, or that they're intending to pull the plug on it. But we do know that Janet Jackson has refused to attend the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame show because it's going to be aired on HBO. So she has refused, Janet Jackson has refused to attend that because it is going to be aired on HBO. So HBO they may not be reporting it, but HBO may be receiving some backlash from being a part of this whole Leaving Neverland thing. But as I've already put in another video, and I'll link that video also in the description box, and I connected all the dots to how HBO and AEG, AEG is the big entertainment promotion company that was involved with Michael. Michael's his mom and his kids sued AEG for wrongful death because they actually hired Conrad Murray to be Michael's physician. And and how Marvin Putnam, he's the attorney from AIG, how he's married to Carrie Putnam, who is a woman that held big positions at HBO. She worked for HBO. I think she worked for HBO like 10, 12 years off and on. She worked for HBO, and she held a president position at HBO at one point. It was either vice president or president position at HBO at one point. Then she left HBO, and remember, she went on to be a president of, I think it was a president of productions at Miramax. And remember, Miramax is the company that Harvey Weinstein owned. So, you know, there was a big old connection there. You know, Oprah's connection to HBO, to David Geffen, her connection to Miramax, Harvey Weinstein, and now we have the attorney for AEG being married to this woman who has held all of these high positions at HBO and Miramax. And then at the time of the documentary premiering at Sundance, she was the executive director of Sundance. And there's a picture of her and Oprah together. So that picture will be a part of this video. So you know, the connection is already there. The connection to how all of these people are connected is already there. And in a later video, I'll even show you the connection that AEG has with this whole Bill Cosby thing. Because now AEG has decided to pay off some of those accusers of Bill Cosby from way back when that just showed up after 20, 30, 40 years. AEG has decided to pay them off to settle with them. And if I'm not mistaken, from what I was hearing, Bill didn't approve that. Bill Cosby didn't approve that. But we'll get into that at some other time. So let me go ahead on and finish reading this story about this little bit about Oprah. A rumor with a little truth behind it is picking up steam, not just for Michael Jackson fans, but for everyone who watched Leaving Neverland. A month after HBO aired the docuseries Leaving Neverland, about two Michael Jackson accusers who say the king of pop abused them over a number of years, Oprah has slowly begun distancing herself from the documentary and her interviews with Wade Robson and James Safechuck. All of her public tweets regarding the documentary have been scrubbed, and the interviews she conducted have been pulled from her YouTube channel. The news comes as Michael Jackson fans and others discovered a huge plot hole in Safechuck's accusation that he was abused inside the train station at Neverland. Safechuck claims his abuse began from 1988 to 1992. The train station didn't begin construction until late 1993 and was officially complete in 1994. And in this article, we have the tweet from Mike Smallcombe. Mike Smallcombe is a journalist, and he was also a biographer for Michael Jackson. And he's done some digging, and he's come up with the actual building permits and all of that Michael had to get in order for the construction to begin on the train station. And there is also aerial footage, an aerial picture, a Getty's image that was taken showing that there was nothing there. There was no train station there in 1993. In 1993, there was no train station there. It says here, the picture below was taken on August 25th, 1993. The train station wasn't there. Top of image. Work on the floral clock had started. So they had started the work on the clock. You know, that floral clock that's in front of the train station, because the train station is one of the most widely photographed probably places in America, because it's so Disneyland-ish, if that's what you want to say, if that's what you want to call it. And on this picture, you can see that the clock in front of the train station, the work on that has begun, but behind the clock is empty. There's nothing there. And this was a picture taken by a Getty's Images photographer. And the picture was taken August the 25th, 1993. And James Safechuck, in the documentary and in his court papers, when he filed the claim against Michael's estate, in his court papers, he makes it clear that, throughout all accounts, every account that he's given of the abuse since they started making these allegations of abuse, he has clearly stated that the abuse began in 1998 and it ended in 1992 when he was 14 years old. It started when he was 10, it ended when he was 14. And he's very clear in the documentary when he's describing all of these different places that him and Michael allegedly had sex. He's very clear that they had sex in this room that was atop of the train station. Well, that's not possible because the train station wasn't even completed until, it wasn't even opened until 1994. And there's another picture, and I'm gonna put that in the video. There's another picture of the actual construction when they actually start constructing it, and you can see them bringing it together. You can see it's like the base of it. They haven't put all the little fancy decorative stuff and everything around it. You can see where the land is being graded and all kinds of construction going on. And I think this picture was taken in December of 1993 because they got the permits to actually start the grading and the building process in September of 1993. And all of these pictures are a part of these tweets that Mike Smallcombe has done, showing the pictures, showing the blueprint of the train station, the permits, all of it. Director Dan Reed defended Safechuck's inaccuracy, noting that despite the train station not being built around the time Safechuck claimed he was abused there, it still doesn't deny that he was abused, period. Okay? But the thing is, if he was wrong about something that he so specifically described, and he was wrong about the dates, okay, you have to look at the timeline. Now, Safechuck and Robson, both of them allege that Michael usually started distancing himself from you and looking at other young boys when you started hitting around the age of puberty. So that's 13, 14 years old, for most boys. When you start hitting the age of puberty, Michael starts separating himself from you. 12, 13, 14, something around there. Okay, well, if Safechuck was already 14 in 1992, the construction for the train station didn't start until late 1993. It wasn't opened until 1994. Michael was not even at Neverland when it was opened. During the whole construction, he was on tour. I think it was the History Tour. He was on tour to promote the History album. Well, yeah, the History Tour. Okay, then he went to, at some point between 93, at some point in 94, Michael went to rehab, and Michael was also living in New York, in Trump Towers. That's where he was living with Lisa Marie. So by the time Michael actually got back in residence at Neverland, it was 1995. So if Safechuck is saying that the abuse ended in 1992, but he has the dates wrong, the date that the abuse actually ended, because that's what Dan Reed is trying to say. Dan Reed is saying, and he actually said this, that, even though, yes, they may have had the date for the train station wrong, what they really messed up on was the date that the abuse actually ended. with Jimmy Safechuck, that it didn't actually end in 1992, that it actually ended closer to 94, 95. Okay, well, if that's the case, then James Safechuck would have been 16, 17 years old when the abuse ended. Because if he was 14 in 92, by 94, he's 16. By 95, when Michael actually comes back, because Michael has not been at Neverland the latter part of 93, 94, he doesn't make it back to Neverland to be in residence at Neverland until 1995. So that would make Safechuck going on maybe 17 years old. By this time, this is almost a full-grown man. He's on the cusp of adulthood. So what are we supposed to believe? That Michael was still abusing him at the age of 16, 17 years old? And then we're still supposed to believe that by this time he didn't know it was wrong? Because that's what you have to believe. That's what you have to believe if you believe that he got the end of the abuse date wrong. So see, that's the excuse now that the whole being abused at the train station has been debunked and proven to be false. Okay, well, if that's false and if you got that wrong, then what else did you get wrong? So Dan Reed tells us, okay, well, don't pay attention to that. Yeah, that date might be wrong, but what they really got wrong was the date of the end of the abuse, which means it didn't end in 92. It ended later than 92. Oh, well, okay, well, considering that Michael wasn't even at residence at Neverland because he was on tour, he was in rehab, and he was living in New York. I think he was living in New York so that he could finish, if I'm not mistaken, maybe the Dangerous album. It was one of his albums he was working on when he was living in New York at the Trump Tower. And he was living there for a while. Lisa Marie was there with him. So they didn't get back to Neverland until 95. So what are you saying? He came back in 95 and picked up the abuse? Okay, well, by that time, you said you're almost 17 years old. You were 14 in 92. So by the time 95 rolls around, you're either 16 going on 17 or you're already 17. So you mean to tell me this man picks up this abuse with you after all of this time that he's been gone because Safechuck didn't go on tour with him. Safechuck was not in the rehab with him. And Safechuck was not living at Trump Tower with him and Lisa Marie. So all this time has gone by. There's been no abuse because you haven't had any contact with him because he has not been here. He has not been at Neverland. He's been all over, bouncing all over the place, on tour, in a rehab, living at Trump Towers. So when he comes back in 95 and you're 16, going on 17 or 17 years old, we're supposed to believe that he picked up the abuse with you? And by this time you didn't realize that it was wrong? And something that's also been debunked is James Safechuck in the documentary says that Michael called him, asking him to testify for him in the 2005 trial. The 2005 trial. He says that Michael picked up the phone, called him, asking him repeatedly to testify for him in the 2005 trial, and that he refused to do it. And when he refused to do it and say that he wouldn't do it, he said that Michael got angry with him and Michael began to threaten him and talk about all the lawyers that he had and all of that. Okay, well, that has been proven to be a lie. Because Nicole, from Nicole's View, she's a YouTuber, and I will link her video in the description box. She actually had an online interview with Scott Ross. who was the investigator, who was the investigator for Michael's defense team during that 2005 trial. And he makes it clear that the judge had already ruled 6-7 months prior, when they were going through, all the motions and all the filings and all of that they go through before they actually start the trial. The judge had already brought down the decision that nothing that had to do with James Safechuck, nothing that had to do with his testimony, nothing that had to do with the depositions that he did back in the 93 allegations, because he did depositions and said that Michael had never touched him, that there had never been anything inappropriate in depositions back in, I believe it was 94. And the judge ruled that none of that was relevant to the 2005 case, and that none of that would be allowed in, and that as far as the 2005 case was concerned, James Safechuck was a non-entity. And because the judge had already ruled, it wasn't up to Tom Sneeden, who was the prosecuting attorney at that time, and the prosecutor, and it wasn't up to Tom Mesereau, who was Michael's defense attorney. It wasn't up to them to decide who would and who would not testify, because the judge has already made it clear prior that James Safechuck had nothing to do with the 2005 trial. So why would Michael be picking up the phone asking him to testify and threatening him? That's not something that Michael would do. Michael didn't have that kind of direct contact with the witnesses. The defense team had that kind of contact with the witnesses. Scott Ross made it clear that it was his responsibility, along with some others, to interview and to question and to have contact with the witnesses in the case. So Michael wouldn't be the one that would have picked up the phone and called him and asked him to testify anyway. But because the judge had already ruled that he was a non-entity, which means he had absolutely nothing to do with that 2005 trial. Nobody would have been contacting him to testify. Okay, I just wanted to put that down there. Progress. The stand seemed to have conceded that Safechuck was molested and are now debating which rooms at Neverland the sex took place in. Plus James's age when it stopped. How about adding up total numbers of nights MJ slept with other people's sons? Was it hundreds or thousands? That's another thing that's been debunked. It's already been debunked by statements from Michael Jackson and by statements from other young men like Macaulay Culkin, Brett Barnes, and others, that there was no thing of you just climb into bed with Michael and y'all sleep together and y'all all cuddled up and all of that. First of all, Michael's bedroom was a duplex. It was a 2-story affair. It's been said that Michael Jackson's bedroom was bigger than some people's apartments. I think it had 2 or 3 bathrooms. It had 2 or 3 walk-in closets. And they say his bed was huge. And there were several occasions where he would let the kids have the bed. And he might start off in the bed with them all. They all laying around eating candy and all kind of junk food and watching movies. And it was never just, one child. There were always at least 2 children, brothers and sisters, and parents would come in the room and spend the night in the room. And when they would wake up the next morning, Michael would be on the floor. The kids would be all passed out in the bed, and Michael would be on the floor. So all of this making this big deal, trying to make this big deal about Michael sleeping with children in beds, it was not like that. It was not how adults think of 2 people in bed together and all cuddled up and what do y'all call, and what do you call it, spooning, and no. They would all, after eating all this food and playing around and pillow fights and all of this kind of stuff, everybody would just pass out exhausted. And when they'd get up the next morning, Michael would be on the floor. If you look at that Martin Bashir document that he did living with Michael, if you look at it before it was edited, you will see that even when he was there with Gavin Avizo, the only part that Martin Bashir made sure that everybody would see was the part when Michael said to the boy, if you love me, you'll sleep in the bed. The part that they don't emphasize is that Michael makes it clear, you and your brother will sleep in the bed, I will sleep on the floor. If you love me, you will take the bed, because Gavin and his brother were talking about sleeping on the floor. And Michael said, no, if you love me, you and your brother will take the bed, I will sleep on the floor. And he makes it clear, I always give the beds to the guest. I'll sleep on the floor. So all of this, like Michael was just having all of these little intimate nights alone with these little boys in the bed and all of that. It was not like that. And to be quite honest, it's a shame that we live in a society where people so sexualize children that they can't understand how a grown person can sleep in the bed with a child and there be absolutely nothing sexual about it. How do parents sleep in the bed with their children and there's nothing sexual about it? I sleep in the bed with mine. There's never been anything sexual about me sleeping in the bed with my children. And there is certainly not anything sexual about me being in a bed with anybody else's child, because I don't look at children like that. So maybe, just maybe, Michael is not the one that was weird. Maybe, just maybe, Michael is not the one that had the problem. Maybe, just maybe, society is the one that has the problem when you can't imagine a grown person being in a bed with a child without it being something sexual. Because I can certainly imagine it. Because I've had 3 or 4 children all piled up in the bed with me at one time. And there was absolutely nothing sexual about it. And they were not all my children. So if the sick minds of society would take the sex out of it and stop sexualizing children, see, that's the reason why pedophilia stands such a great chance of being legalized in the United States. It's because we so sexualize children. If you take the sexual aspect out of it, because Michael made it clear there's nothing sexual in it. He said that's what happens when people hear that Michael is sleeping with children. They automatically want to go to something sexual. And that's what you do if you can sexualize a child. But if you don't sexualize children and you don't see anything sexual or anything sexy about a child, then yes, you can imagine a grown person being in the bed with a child and absolutely nothing happening. So let's move on. Meanwhile, HBO is rumored to be dropping the documentary from its lineup of air dates later this month, as opposed to its original end time of September. The docuseries, which opened to rave reviews at Sundance this past February, is set to air again on HBO on April 17th, with no further listed dates after that. HBO has yet to comment publicly. The rumored report of his removal comes on the heels of the fact that the Jackson estate is suing HBO over the airing of the documentary, and Jackson's nephews are currently raising money to create a counter documentary. Okay, now that's the end of that story in theboxhouston.com. Now we want to go over here to a story in NME. Now, and yes, I just want to go ahead and throw this out there and let you know that the Jackson family has completed their short documentary that counters Leaving Neverland. Is on YouTube. There will be a link to it in the description box, and there is also one of these articles that I'm going to read from, that if you go to the article you can see it. And it's interviews with family members and other people that are going to provide you with the information that Leaving Neverland so conveniently left out. But yes, that has been completed. That's done. Okay, again, this is an article in NME, April 4th, 2019. Charlotte Cruel. Leaving Neverland director continues to defend film amid Michael Jackson biographers' claims that new evidence disproves abuse. Dan Reed claims that the evidence still supports the allegations made in the film. First of all, let me say about Dan Reed. Dan Reed was, I believe he was with Piers Morgan when he claimed that he had done the background, the background work. He'd done the research, and that he had no reason to not believe the allegations that Robson and Safechuck was making. That can't possibly be true. Because if he'd have done the real research, if he'd have really went on a fact-finding mission before he became a part of this Leaving Neverland mockumentary, then he would have at least known that the train station didn't exist at the time that Safechuck said he was being abused in it. So he was being abused in a non-existent building. He would have at least known that. And he would have read the court papers, and he would have read some of the depositions from 93, 94, and the 2005 trial, and he would have seen the discrepancies there as well, because there are discrepancies there as well. And we'll get into that. Anyway, the director of Leaving Neverland continues to defend the film against a biographer's claims that his newfound evidence could disprove some of the child sexual abuse allegations leveled at Michael Jackson by Wade Robson and James Safechuck. Mike Smallcombe, a British journalist and the author of Making Michael, said that he uncovered historic testimony by Robson's mother that contradicts Robson allegations detailed in Leaving Neverland. Smallcombe also claims that a part of Safechuck's allegation is inconsistent with facts surrounding the construction of Jackson's Neverland's train station. Speaking to the Mirror Online on Friday, March 29th, Smallcombe made reference to the fact that Robson said the abuse started when his family went to the Grand Canyon and he stayed behind with Michael at Neverland. But Smallcombe claims that Robson's mother, Joy, told a court under oath in 1993 that Robson actually joined them on the trip. Okay, and the images of these depositions are actually a part of, again, his Twitter. It says, first image, Joy Robson's 1993 deposition confirming her family went away to Grand Canyon and that Wade hadn't been alone at Neverland until that year, 1993. So she was doing this deposition in 1993. I think the family would have went on that trip to the Grand Canyon, I think, in 91. And Wade says that that's when the abuse began, because his whole family went to the Grand Canyon. Grandparents, his sister, his brother, his mother, his father, all of them, and he was left there alone with Michael. And that's when the abuse started. But Joy Robson actually says that her whole family went on this trip. And she does not make any mention in this deposition under oath in 93 that Wade stayed behind. And she also says that she never left Wade alone at Neverland until 1993. That there was never a time that he was at Neverland without her prior to 1993. So if that's the case, then there's no way that he was left behind when the whole family went to the Grand Canyon. Because she's saying that prior to 1993, she, as a mother, had never left him alone at Neverland. Second image, Joy Robson's 2016 deposition. This is when her son had filed the case against Michael and his estate. She again confirms her whole family, including Wade, went to the Grand Canyon. And I mean, when you go to the article, if you click on the tweets, you can actually click on it and pull up these different images and actually view these images on Twitter of these depositions, the questions that she was asked and how she answered those questions. And remember, these depositions are under oath. These are sworn testimony, just like you being under oath in the courtroom. His mother, Joy Robson, testified under oath in a deposition in 1993-94 in relation to the Jordy Chandler case that Wade had actually gone with them on that trip to the Grand Canyon before the entire family returned to Neverland for the second time the following weekend. Joy Robson had no reason to lie about this. She openly admitted that Wade stayed with Jackson alone on other occasions, but not prior to 1993. She could have said Wade stayed behind with Michael when we went away to the Grand Canyon between weekends. It wouldn't have made a difference. Last week, March 30th, Smallcombe again told the Mirror that part of Safechuck's testimony cannot be true. And again, that goes back to the whole train station thing. Okay, and in this article again, you have a picture of, and I just clicked on it. You have a picture of the permit with the blueprint of the train station, and it's stamped on there, approved September 2nd, 1993. So that was just the approval for them to go in and start doing the grading, the digging, and the construction of the train station. September 1993. It wasn't completed until, I think it was April 1994 when it was completed and opened. And Michael wasn't even at residence at Neverland when it was completed and opened. Okay, let's finish this article and get to some more. See, this is what Dan Reed had to say about the date of the construction of the station and all this. Yeah, there seems to be no doubt about the station date, wrote Reed. The date they have wrong is the end of the abuse. So see, in order to try to cover his tracks, because at least he didn't do his necessary, research to know what was really going on. That's the least he didn't do, was to research and make sure that these allegations, these facts that he was getting ready to put in this so-called documentary and air in front of everybody, at least that the facts were correct. So to cover his tracks and to cover the documentary, instead of just admitting, okay, well, that was wrong, that was false, or whatever, he tries to push back or push up the date that the abuse ended. That's how he's trying to work this. So instead of saying, okay, the abuse ended in 1992, he's trying to push that up to at least 1994 and 95. Especially when you take into consideration that throughout this whole building process of the train station and even it opening up, Michael wasn't even in residence at Neverland. Okay. In an additional statement to ENME, Reed said that these documents did not clash with the claims made in the film as sexual abuse is still alleged to have occurred after the construction of the train station, which is depicted in Neverland. James Safechuck was present at Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch both before and after the construction of the train station. The two still photographs of the train station shown in the documentary were taken by Safechuck and provided to the filmmaker by him. Safechuck's testimony in the film is that he was abused by Jackson in multiple places over several years into his teens. Okay, well, that doesn't make any sense because he's already said under oath in his court papers that the abuse ended in 1992. So was he lying in his court papers? And then he said on the Leaving Neverland document that the abuse ended in 1992. So now what is Dan Reed doing? Now he's proceeding to tell the story for Safechuck and trying to add another 2 or 3 years on to the amount of time that he was abused. And remember, both of them, Robson and Safechuck, said that once you went into puberty, Michael started distancing himself from you and started looking for other younger boys. So by 94, 95, James Safechuck is 16, 17 years old. Okay, well, he's well beyond the age of puberty now. He's going into adulthood. So this 16, 17-year-old young man, he's no longer a little boy. Now he's a young man. This young man is continuing to have this abusive sexual relationship with Michael Jackson and still claiming that he didn't know it was wrong? No. Okay, well, it goes on. The article goes on to go back and forth with all of these tweets between Dan Reed and other people that were on Mike Smallcombe's Twitter at that time because of this new evidence, and he keeps trying to defend the documentary and all of that. No, it's blown. It's blown because we have Safechuck in court papers, sworn depositions, sworn complaints saying that the abuse lasted from 1988 to 1992, and specifically saying that he was molested in this train station. Okay, well, if he was molested in that train station, then that means he was molested in that train station when he was 16 or 17 years old. And that does not go along with what he's already testified to, doesn't go along with what him and Robson both have said in the documentary, and that is that once you start reaching the age of puberty, Michael starts separating himself from you. And you start spending less and less time with him because he starts looking for younger boys to replace you. So either way you look at it, it makes no sense. It doesn't add up. Responding to Reed's comment with the Mirror, Smallcombe describes his comments as embarrassing. Because the story has been debunked, it appears Reed is now suddenly wanting to change Safechuck's timeline himself, he said. Firstly, I'm shocked that he's spoken on Safechuck's behalf. And secondly, it's embarrassing that he feels he has to now change the narrative of the film, which is that the alleged abuse stopped in 1992, all because part of it has been disproved. He continued, that's what happens when you take allegations like that at face value and make no attempts to scrutinize and investigate whether they are true. So like I said, the least he did was bring out and promote these allegations and promote these accusers as being beyond reproach. You know what I'm saying? You just believe them. And he himself had not done any fact checking. He himself had not done any investigation. Because had he done the minimal of investigation, he would have found that there was no train station in 1992. Speaking to NME, Smallcombe added, these are two extremely detailed and key stories in the documentary, especially in the case of Wade Robson, which have been provably fabricated. And while this doesn't categorically rule out that Jackson abused them, it does make you wonder if they fabricated these stories, what about the rest? Because, you know, they've proven already that Wade Robson lied about a number of things. You know, both of them have changed, have amended their complaints and changed their stories 3 or 4 different times. You know, we have Wade Robson saying the first time that the reason why he didn't say anything to anybody about the abuse is because Michael told him, you know, if he say anything to anybody about it, they're going to lock us both up. We're both going to jail. So, you know, you have to be quiet. Okay, well, you know, that didn't trigger you. He said that Michael told him this when he was, what, maybe about 10, 11, 12 years old. Okay, well, that didn't trigger you into believing it. Okay, well, wait a minute. If you're talking about going to jail, then how can this not be wrong? That didn't trigger her. Okay, then he changed it and said that the reason why he didn't say anything about it was because of shame. He was too ashamed to say anything to anybody about it. He was too ashamed to admit the abuse. Then he changes the story again and says that he didn't realize that it was abuse until late 2012, 2013. That's when he realized that it was actually abuse and it was wrong. So you can't have it all 3 ways. Okay, again, we have Safechuck lying on the documentary saying that Michael contacted him, got mad at him, and threatened him when he wouldn't agree to testify at the 2005 trial. But we have Scott Ross, the investigator for the defense team, saying that by that time, by 2005, Safechuck, his testimony, anything that he may have had was not even, it was irrelevant. The judge had ruled him a non-entity. We also had Robson saying that, I think he said this in the documentary, that he was subpoenaed to testify at the 2005 trial. But then he turns around and says that Michael called him, asked him to testify, told him they're saying all kind of disgusting things about me and you, all kind of disgusting things about what we've been doing. And they're just trying to ruin us. They're just trying to destroy both of our careers, and we need to fight. And he said that was Michael's role-playing way of controlling him and coaching him on what to say. Okay, now either you were subpoenaed or Michael asked you to testify. Then we have Tom Mesereau coming out saying that they asked him to testify and he had no problem with it. to the point where he was their strongest witness. That's why he was the first witness for the defense, because he was the strongest, most powerful witness that they had. There were no subpoenas involved. For him to testify, for his mama to testify, for his sister to testify, there were no subpoenas involved. Just lies, one lie on top of the other. Smallcombe explains why he feels compelled to research the allegations against Jackson. The whole idea behind doing this research is to offer the balance that wasn't there in the first place. Firstly, in the documentary, which made no attempt to investigate whether the pair's allegations were indeed true, or to challenge two people who are after hundreds of millions of dollars. The documentary violated all norms and ethics in filmmaking and journalism. There's another British journalist, I think his name is Charles, I'm trying to get his name, Thompson. I'll get his name and I'll get one of his interviews that he's done, because he's done several interviews in the UK and on radio stations and all this, talking about how this is just one of the darkest, most embarrassing forms of journalism, the way this whole thing with Michael has been dealt with, even back as far as 1993, how all of these allegations have been dealt with in the media as far as journalism is concerned. It is just ridiculous. And I'll make sure to link some of his commentary and some of his interviews in the description box, so you can go back and hear, how he just breaks everything down. The media coverage around the documentary has also been atrocious, with reporters just regurgitating articles and not bothering to research the other side of the story. They are probably wary of how it might affect their reputations, but journalism is about seeking the truth at any cost, he said. Wade states in my film that he had perjured himself because he could not bear to see Jackson, the man he loved, go to jail. See, there he go again with that whole, trying to act like it was just, this loving, they were in love type of relationship. That whole Mambler thing that has just stuck out with me throughout this whole thing. To be honest, it's like all of them are a bunch of perverts. It's like all of them are a bunch of pedophiliac perverts. Like they got off on, telling this sick, twisted story and trying to make it seem like it was some kind of strange love story. Like these boys, if Michael was molesting these boys, like these boys and Michael had these loving, nurturing, just, beautifully awesome, pleasurable sexual relationships. It's sick. And that's another thing. James Safechuck claims that he never said anything to anybody about it. He never told anybody anything about it. But yet in the documentary, his mom goes into all about how happy she was and she wanted to get up and shout and dance and all that when she heard in 2009 that Michael had died, and she was so glad that he was dead. She wanted to dance and she wanted to do a jig, or that's just me paraphrasing, but whatever, because she was thinking, thank God he can never hurt another child. Okay, but you claim your son didn't say anything to you about it until 2012, 2013? Because up until that point, your son, Wade, and so many others had defended Michael. So in 2009, why were you so happy that he was dead? Because it's not like you knew he had abused your child, or anybody else's for that matter. The Jackson estate has again denied all allegations against Michael. And I do believe that this is the article where you can actually see, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's the Hold documentary from the Jackson family. But if not, like I said, that will be definitely linked in the description box. Okay, now let's move on to our next article. And this comes from thehooksite.com. And I will, in the video, you will see the aerial picture that the Getty's photographer took in August of 1992. And you'll see the flower clockwork has begun that rests in front of the train station. But you also see behind it this big empty spot. And this was August 1992. No, August 1993, because they didn't get the permits to begin grading and building and begin construction until September 1993. Yeah, this is in thehook.com, thehooksite.com. Michael Jackson's family releases their counter documentary to Leaving Neverland. Trying to see if there's a date on this article. I don't see a date on it. But it's by Joshua Rogers. The Michael Jackson saga, as predicted by many, continues to rumble on. The hugely controversial documentary Leaving Neverland gripped the world when it aired last month, inducing feelings of sickness and disgust among some, while oddly drumming up support for the late icon for others. The 4-hour documentary, which is actually really tough to get through, features allegations made by Wade Robson and James Safechuck, who both claimed that Michael abused them on numerous occasions when they were children. From the very outset, MJ's estate and family have vehemently denied the allegations leveled at Jackson, claiming that they were nothing but lies. And as promised, they finally released their counter documentary titled Neverland FirstHand, investigating the Michael Jackson documentary, which will apparently shed light on information left out of Leaving Neverland. The 30-minute documentary was created by Liam McHugh and contains interviews from Michael Jackson's family and close friends, one of which includes Michael's niece Brandy, who dated Wade Robson and refers to him as a bit of an opportunist. He knows how to position himself in different situations that will benefit him in a financial way. Once other jobs weren't coming through, this was his next outlet, she says. It also features interviews with Brad Sandberg, Jackson's technical director, who says, "Not in a million years did I ever see a child around Michael Jackson that looked like they had been distressed, hurt, or abused." A description of the doc reads, Neverland FirstHand, investigating the Michael Jackson documentary, is a mini documentary which further explores allegations made in HBO's Leaving Neverland that the King of Pop sexually abused 2 young boys. Through interviews with those closest to the situation, as well as members of Jackson's family, the film sheds light on information that was excluded from HBO's broadcast. In the aftermath of Leaving Neverland, Michael's nephew, Taj Jackson, said he was keen to create a counter documentary, so it comes as no surprise one has come out. Speaking to NME, Taj said, "It's going to start off with the 1993 allegations because I think that's where everything started. So it's going to start there. It's going to talk about the settlement in terms of the civil suit and why he settled. At one point, Michael, was very against settling and angry and then gave in. So why did he do that? It's going to talk about all that. 1993-94 to 2005 are the big parts of his life. So this is not going to be a puff piece. It's not going to be, oh, let's show Michael Jackson the humanitarian. This is about exposing all the things that have been mustering for 20, 30 years, you know. I'm going to go with the facts. The documentary has been released to YouTube and can be watched in full below. I have a feeling this is going to cause a stir. Yeah, this is the article where you can actually watch the Jackson family documentary, Neverland FirstHand. So of course this will be linked in the description box. So I just wanted to bring you the latest information, let you know that they are continuing to debunk these allegations that Robson and Safechuck made in the Leaving Neverland document. They're continuing to debunk them. If you go and there's a site where a Michael Jackson site, I think it may be one of his companies has put up this site, or maybe the family or whatever, but you can actually go on this site and you can read all the depositions. You can read the complaints from Wade and Safechuck when they sued both times, because you know Wade sued twice. He went first to the corporate to Michael's businesses, and that was thrown out because of the statute of limitations. Then he went back to sue the estate, and that was thrown out because they found him to just be a blatant liar. There were just entirely too many falsehoods and fabrications in the complaint, and the judge just threw it out and said that there was no way that they could even think about presenting it to a jury. And Safechuck's was thrown out, if I'm not mistaken, for the same reason. And you have to think they Safechuck's didn't even get to that point. His was thrown out in this motion that the defense that can bring to that it doesn't even make it past the motion stage. And that's where it was thrown out. It didn't even get as far as Wade's got. And now they have appeals. So now these cases are on appeal. So they've not stopped trying to get hundreds of millions of dollars from the Jackson estate. But if you go on this site, and I will link that site as well in the description box, you can actually go and see these depositions, these sworn depositions. You can actually go see their complaints. You can actually go see how many times they amended their complaints. That means how many times they changed their complaints, their original complaints. You know, the original complaint is the document, the legal document, the sworn document that holds the allegations. And each one of them went back 3 or 4 different times and changed their complaints, amended their complaints. So I'll make sure to put that down in the description box so that you can go and you can see these documents and read these depositions and read the answers that they gave, these sworn answers that they gave during their depositions. Because, see, that's what happens. Most of the time, you don't have too many depositions in criminal cases, but you have depositions in civil cases. And sometimes, based on the depositions, you don't actually have to go to trial. You know, a lot of times it's after everybody and the witnesses and all of that have been deposed. That's what they call it, deposed. Have been deposed. it's usually when they decide that they're going to settle a case or whatever, because, certain information has come out in these sworn depositions. But remember, these sworn depositions are testimony under oath. They're the same as you being in a courtroom, putting your hand on that Bible and swearing that you're going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So I will have that linked in the description box as well. Again, I'll have the aerial picture that shows that there was no train station as of August 25th, 1993. I'll have that picture, and I'll also have that picture that I wanted you to see of Oprah with Carrie Putnam, Marvin Putnam's wife. The woman that was in such cahoots with HBO, Miramax, and Sundance, married to the attorney for AEG. And she's Hollywood. She's all a part of Hollywood. So I'll show you a picture of her with Oprah. So again, they're just rumors that they're talking about pulling the plug, that HBO is talking about pulling the plug on Leaving Neverland. It has not been confirmed yet. Right now it's just rumor, but it's not rumor that Oprah is trying to back away from it, that Oprah is trying to distance herself from it, because those tweets, the interviews that she had with Wade Robson and Jimmy Safechuck have been pulled from her YouTube channel. Pictures and tweets have been pulled, and posts have been deleted all over the place. So that's not rumored that she's doing that. She's definitely trying to distance herself from this. And I think the reason why she's trying to distance herself from this is because she has received such a horrible backlash. And she has this big deal with Apple, where she's supposed to be producing content for them and coming up with documentaries and all of this kind of stuff for them. And I think she's trying to get her numbers back, because she has to be able to produce these numbers. She has to be able to produce these ratings for Apple, because this has been a big major deal. And it was probably some millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars involved with that. So she's trying to rescue herself before any of that content that she's producing with them is actually aired. So she's trying to do some PR work. That's what she's trying to do. She's trying to do some public relation work and trying to kind of clean up her image some, so that it won't have an effect on her ratings when the time comes for her to start airing the content that she has with Apple. But it's too late. It's too late. It's too late. And she knew about the deal with Apple before this Neverland business came out. But she had no idea that she would receive the kind of backlash that she received from being a part of this mess. So she should have been careful about who she was, showing her allegiance to, because she was showing her allegiance to her friends and her handlers and all of that in Hollywood. Harvey Weinstein, David Geffen, that's who she was pledging her allegiance to in stabbing Michael in the back. And now it's going to come to bite her in the butt. So I just wanted to give y'all the latest. Of course, please take the time to look at the counter documentary that the Jackson family has come out with. Please take, it'll be posted. The link to it directly to the documentary will be in the description box, as well as the link to this article, where if you go to this article, you can watch it within this article. These articles, of course, will be linked in the description box. Please like, please share, please comment, please support the channel. The link to the PayPal will also be in the description box. Please hit that bell notification. Please subscribe. But yeah, let's keep our eyes open and see, what the Jackson family's documentary, let's see what kind of stir and what kind of, response we're going to get from that, because mainstream media is still not talking about. Most of the talk that's going on about this whole Leaving Neverland thing is going on in the UK. Mainstream media in the United States is still not saying anything. They're still not saying anything positive about Michael. They're still not saying anything about all of these discrepancies and all of these blatant lies that Wade Robson and Jimmy Safechuck told in this documentary. Mainstream media is still not offering Michael any kind of support. And I honestly believe that what his legacy, his children, his family deserve is an apology from the mainstream media outlets in the United States, because they have been reporting false reports and all kind of bogus stories and all that about this man ever since what, 91, 92? Ever since they found out that he had bought the Beatles catalog, and ever since they found out that he owned half of Sony's publishing, they have been out to get this man. They have been out to get him ever since then. Before then, Michael was fine. But, check the links, like, share, subscribe, comment, support, and please take a look at Neverland FirstHand, the documentary, the mini documentary from Michael Jackson's family. And stay tuned. Stay tuned to Undiluted TV, because I'm going to bring it to you raw and undiluted. So we'll just see what comes up next. So y'all have a good day and be blessed.